So guys, today I'm going to be showing you how to draft a basic bodice block with a side dart, and with this you'll be able to derive any design that you want. So make sure to watch till the end. So we're going to start by drawing our shoulder line. I'm just going to name it there. Then next we're going to measure the shoulder to the bust measurement. Mine is 11. Then we shall measure the shoulder to the under bust measurement. Mine is 14.25. Then we measure from the shoulder to the waist measurements, which is 18 inches for me. Then we shall measure the shoulders to the hip measurements, which is 28 inches for me. We shall use the shoulder to the hip measurement as our full length. So we can now go ahead and draw the lines. That's our bust line. Then that's our under bust line. Then the next is our waist line. The last one is our hip line, which is acting as our full length. Then I'll just go ahead and label them. So the front neckline is going to be 3 by 3. And then we're going to join it just like that. So the next is we're going to put the X back, which is a half of the measurement, which is 7. And then we shall go down by 1 inch for the shoulder slope, and then we shall join the line like that. So the next is we're going to find our armhole line, which will also be the chest line, and that's 8 inches for me. So that's the method for getting the chest line. So we shall just stretch the line like that. Then we shall go ahead and name it the armhole or chest line. So we're going to get the same measurement from there, which is 7. Then we shall bring it down there and also mark 7. Then we shall join the line. On that very line, we shall mark the center, and then we shall either go in by 0.5 or 0.75. So I'm going to use 0.75 because I want the front armhole to be a bit deeper than the back. So on the chest line, we shall measure the bust circumference, divide by 4, which is 9. And then we shall join it with a curve. So we shall then extend the bust measurements to the bust line as well. Then we shall move to the dart, where we shall measure our nipple to nipple measurements, divide by 2. So my measurement is 8, which we divide by 2 to get 4. We shall mark it on the waistline, the under bust line, the bust line, and the hip line, and then draw a line. So on the waist, the dart is going to be either 0.5, 0.75, or 1, depending on your size. So I'm going to mark 0.75 inches on both sides, and then I'll join them with a line. So at the front, the dart is going to start from the bust line. For the bottom of the dart, we're going to go up the hip line by 2 inches. Then we shall join it just like that. So now we're going to mark the rest of our horizontal measurements. On the bust line, there is no dart, so it's just going to be the bust measurement, divide by 4. And then for the under bust, it's going to be your under bust measurements, divide by 4. And then you're going to measure that part of the dart, and then you're going to replace it on the side. So we then move on to the waist measurements, divided by 4, which is 7.5. And then you measure that part, which is 1.5, and replace it. For the hip measurements, we're just going to do the hip measurements, divide by 4, because there is no dart to replace. So then we're going to join the lines just like that. So we're going to move to the side dart on the bust line, which is the difference between the shoulder to the waist of the front and the distance between the shoulder to the waist of the back. So we're going to put the measurements on the bust line going downwards. Mine is 1.75. And then we're going to join it to the top of the dart. So that's going to be our side dart. So we're going to make sure that the side of the pattern aligns after we have joined the dart. So we're just going to do that and make sure that the sides align. Mine is aligning for the most part, but in case yours doesn't align properly, you just have to connect it with a line. We shall then come to the center of that dart, and then we shall mark the midpoint. Then we shall go out 1/4 to 1/2 inch, and then we shall join the points. So this is it for the front. So that part is the center front, which will be cut on fold. So when you're cutting, you won't be having to add any allowance to the center fold. You can add allowance to the side, maybe 0.5 or 1 inch, but then along the armhole, the neckline and the shoulder, it should be 0.5. Then at the hemline, you can add 1.5 or 2 inches, depending on your preference. So that's it. We're going to move on to the back. So before we do the back, we're going to add a zip allowance, and then we shall mark our starting point. So the back and the front are similar. We're going to do the same thing for the shoulder line, the armhole line, the bust line. The difference comes at the underbust because the back doesn't have an underbust. The second difference is the shoulder to the waist measurement is different for the back. So let's first mark some points that are similar, like that part of the neckline is similar. The shoulder slope is also still 1 inch. We shall then just join the line. So another difference between the back and the front is the neckline in that area. We go down by 1 inch instead of 3 inches for the back. And then we shall draw a curve. So while drafting a basic bodice block, the back neckline is always higher than the front neckline. So we shall continue measuring from the shoulder point to the armhole line, which is the same. So just a recap, that was 7, which was half of the X back. And then we went down by 1 inch. And then from that shoulder slope, we're going down by 8 inches, which is the armhole line. That's the same as the front. Then we get that same measurement of the X back and pull it down there and mark 7 inches and then join the points. So we're going to find the midpoint of that line and mark it, and then we're going to go in by 0.5 inches. So just like we did in the front, we're going to measure the bust measurements there, divide by 4, which was 9 for me. And then we shall draw the curve. So if you recall, at the front I used 0.75 for my armhole curve, and so there's a slight difference for me. I did that because I wanted my front armhole to be a bit deeper than the back, but you can always use 0.5 on both the front and the back. So next we're going to measure our shoulder to bust line. And then for the next line, we won't be measuring our underbust because there's no underbust. The next would be the shoulder to waist, which is different, like we discussed earlier. So I'll go ahead and measure 14.25, which is my back shoulder to waist measurement. So I'm bringing in the front pattern. So I'm going to mark out the underbust, the bust line, the chest line or armhole line, and the waistline. So now you can see that the armhole line is the same, the bust line is the same, there's no underbust because it's irrelevant for the back. So the next is the waistline, and you can clearly see a difference between the front and the back. That distance will be eliminated after the side dart has been sewn in. So you can see that the waistline is now aligning. So the next thing is we're going to measure our full length, but we're not going to measure from the shoulder to the hemline. What we're going to do instead is we're going to get that measurement from the waist of the front to the hemline and just transfer it to the waist of the back. So that's how we shall get the back hemline. Then now we're going to move on to the dart line of the back. We shall measure half of our nipple to nipple measurements. We shall do that along the waistline, the hemline, the bust line, and this time we shall move it also to the chest line or armhole line. So we are going to extend the chest line or armhole line, and then we shall extend the dart line up to that point. Then we shall mark the dart width on each side, which is 0.75 and 0.75. You could use 0.5 or 1 inch if that's what you used at the front. Then we're going to just join the lines like that. At the bottom, we shall go up by 2 inches from the hip line. Then you can go ahead and join the lines. So then we shall mark the bust measurements, divide by 4, and then we shall measure that small portion of the dart and replace it at the side there. And we shall move on to the waist and mark the waist measurements, divide by 4, and then we shall measure that and move it there. And on the hip, we shall just measure hips, divide by 4, because there is no dart at the hips. We shall then join the lines just like we did at the front. Actually, I had forgotten to tell you that at the bust line, when you add the measurement of the dart, we're going to also extend it to the chest line or armhole line, and then we shall be able to join the line easily. We are now almost finished with the back. We're just left with one thing. So we shall extend the neckline just like that, and also the hemline just like that. Then on the waistline, we're going to come out by 1 inch and mark it there. So this will help to eliminate the bulge at the zip. So we shall leave the neckline and the hemline at 1.5 inches, but the waist will be 1 inch, and then we shall join the points just like that. And we shall go ahead and then cut the rest of it. So just like the front, make sure to add your sewing allowances when you're cutting on fabric, because we haven't added them while we were drafting. So as you can see, we are done. If you notice, the back pattern is shorter than the front pattern, but that will be sorted out after the side dart is sewn in. You'll realize that the front hemline will move upwards to meet the back hemline. Okay guys, like the video if it was helpful and leave any questions in the comment section. See you in the next video.